Automotives, a podcast covering the most important issues for the automotive aftermarket industry in Europe and beyond. Brought to you by FIGIFA.
Hello everybody, my name is Álvaro de la Cruz, Head of Communications of FIGIFA and your host. Welcome to our first episode of Automotives, a podcast series that will bring you your key issues of the European and international technical and legislative developments affecting the automotive industry in general and the independent parts and maintenance sector in particular. At the end of the day, almost every family in Europe owns at least a car that, eventually, needs replacement parts and to be repaired. And we believe that it is crucial that independent distributors and workshops can offer you quality products and services at your proximity, at affordable price, and in a sustainable way. We are FIGIFA, the International Federation of Automotive Aftermarket Distributors, and we have working for this industry since the late 50s. We plan to continue doing so for many more decades. On today's episode, we will be discussing one of the most important regulations for the automotive aftermarket in Europe, the Motor Vehicle Block Exemption Regulation, or MVBER. For more than 10 years, the MVBR has set the legal frame which allows our independent parts distribution and repair companies to provide competitive aftermarket services in fair competition with the vehicle manufacturers network. However, this crucial legislation is due to expire in May 2023. At this moment, the European Commission is reviewing this sector-specific legislation and is currently working on its future. As of now, there is a major risk that the MVBR would just be extended for 5 years as such, but without any further significant improvement, thus maintaining the legal statu quo, even if the technical and commercial reality of 2023 is quite different to the one of 2010 when it came into power. The MVBR guarantees, among others, three main sets of measures to ensure your ability to be competitive. First, vehicle manufacturers may not hinder their original equipment supplies from also supplying their products, components, and spare parts to independent distributors. Secondly, vehicle manufacturers may not make the warranties conditional on the repair or servicing of a vehicle within their network or on the use of their own branded spare parts, and consumers have the right to use any repair shop for non-warranty work. Thirdly, vehicle manufacturers have to give independent operators access to technical information at the same time as to their authorized repairers. To discuss this fundamental piece of legislation for the European automotive sector, and more specifically the issue of captive parts, we have today a great voice from the industry, Alex Gelbcke, CEO of LKQ for France and Benelux. LKQ-Fource delivers thousands of car parts, lubricants, and tools every day. The company has globally 40,000 employees and 1,600 locations in 25 countries, making it one of the leaders in the sector both in Europe and in America. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Alex.
Thank you. Hello, Alvaro.
Alex, in the past years, we have witnessed the increasing phenomenon of what is commonly described as captive parts. Can you briefly explain what this is and what is the impact of parts captivity in the aftermarket value chain?
Absolutely. A captive part is a spare part that can only be sourced through the vehicle manufacturer channel. The problem is that independent wholesalers cannot have access to those parts and so cannot provide the one-stop shop offer to the multi-brand workshops. And so we lose efficiency in the entire chain, and the garagist, the person who fixes your car on a regular basis, does not have access to those parts. So we understand perfectly that some parts, some replacement parts are own construction parts from the vehicle manufacturers. That's not really the issue, even though it should be solved. I mean, the design protected parts, the body panels and such cannot be found in the independent network, but that's another topic. The main problem we're having is that there's a number of parts which now are made artificially captive. Through technologies, new technologies, technical progress, there's a possibility for vehicle manufacturers to make sure that some parts can only be fitted with their presence, involvement, sale of the part, access to a certain software. So this is reducing the competitivity of the independent aftermarket, and as such, it is reducing the possibility for the car owner, the car user, to choose freely where he wants to get his car being maintained. Now, we've been making an assessment, we've been making a survey among our customers. We have 1,700 workshops across Europe that have answered that survey. And we have noticed that 86% of those so-called captive parts are sold back into to the car owner at a 33% higher price because cannot be sourced from the traditional channels. So that is immediately a price increase, a lack of competitivity, which is affecting the car users.
Okay. Could you give some examples of new methods of introducing captivity in the market?
Yeah. So it's really the technological developments that have given more opportunity to create a captivity of certain parts. One of the growing phenomenon we're observing is the parts coding. So you put a code on a part, and without the activation of that code, you cannot link it properly to the vehicle. You cannot make it functional. Let me give you a practical example. This is very often used with headlamps, right? If a headlamp is not being properly coded and connected to the vehicle through a software which is proprietary technology of the vehicle manufacturer, it will not operate properly. And so an independent wholesaler, while that job is very easy, is being blocked because he doesn't have the possibility to activate the part. So even if that part is coming from the tier one supplier that is the creator of the part, which is the one that has manufactured the part for the vehicle manufacturer. I mean, we all know that there's not one vehicle manufacturer around the planet that has ever developed a headlamp, right? It is being done by specialists in headlamps, and there's great names in the industry. We source from exactly the same person, the exact same company, the exact same part, and yet we cannot fit it because it is blocked by a code.
Interesting. And what is the direct repercussion of parts captivity in the industry?
Well, unfortunately, it is like every monopoly, right? This is a monopoly that the vehicle manufacturer enjoys on those parts, and a monopoly always translates in higher price for the consumer. So the consumer, instead of having the choice between a dealership, an authorized repair, or an independent player, he will have the choice between a dealership, an authorized, and a non-efficient, too expensive, artificially expensive independent operator. And that is that surprice, which is impacting, well, basically, I mean, we have a crisis right now. The consumer price index are up in the entire Europe. This is just aggravating the factor. 13% of the budget of a household is the mobility. It is keeping that car on the road. It is fueling it, paying insurance, but also repairing it. Well, we're just artificially accepting to have those prices increased.
Okay, and what would be the solution?
Well, unfortunately, I think the only way to find a solution is through legislation. If it's not a legislative solution, it will not work. We cannot afford to have a court case every time there's a barrier, there's a hurdle to free trade. An independent garagist will not go for a job that he's losing on a headlamp to the court. I mean, the first time he would open his mouth in front of a lawyer, he would already have lost the whole margin. So we're talking about a fight that will not exist. So the only way to address it is through legislation. And what we need is really at the minimum first to provide the access to those parts. And that can easily be achieved under the proposed and existing MVBER by amending the supplementary guidelines. So giving access to the part is really that number one. Number two is making the activation codes available so that the operators in the independent aftermarket can perform their job for which they are being trained, they have experience. It's generally a full generation working on vehicles. Those people know cars extremely well. They have all the tooling which is necessary, all the experience multi-brand that is necessary to perform the job. They're just blocked and hindered by that activation of code.
So the motor vehicle block exemption regulation would be a crucial legislation in this sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, we're really talking about a simple number of points. It's removing the barrier, making sure that we don't have those barriers, commercial and technological barriers. It's giving the access to these captive parts. It is ending the bundling of contracts. Today, if a distributor wants to distribute those parts, he's got to be an installer, a workshop himself. That is absolutely not efficient. I mean, we are running thousands of locations across Europe to provide the right part at the right time to the right workshop so that he can perform the right job. But we're not a garagist, right? Those are two different jobs. We're ensuring the logistics from the manufacturer of that part, the renowned manufacturer, the one that has been chosen by the vehicle manufacturer, down to the person who's going to install it on your car. That is the efficiency that is found into the distribution, and Europe is usually very good at logistics, so that is well performed. But those barriers need to be absolutely removed. And then maybe one other point we weren't talking very often about is the enforcement. We need to make sure that the enforcement of whatever regulation is being really put in place. Without that enforcement, any legislation is just inefficient. And we believe that with the means of the Commission, the powers it's got to investigate and challenge market participants more regularly, this would definitely help a healthy competition to the benefit of the European people.
Thank you, Alex. That is a very good summary of what the situation of car parts in Europe currently is and the risks we're facing already today. There's no doubt that legislative action to protect fair competition, freedom of choice by the consumer, and adaptation to the technological developments is desperately needed. We call the Director General for Competition, Madame Vestager, and the entire European Commission to act now and not to wait for 5 more years, as it might be too late for many important independent players in Europe, representing made in Europe value, millions of jobs, and key business poles in so many villages, towns, and cities across the continent. It was a pleasure to have you, Alex. Thank you very much. Thank you all for listening, and don't miss out our next episode coming soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
That was today's Automotives episode. Subscribe to our channels for more to come.